Okay, so here is the Genetics 101 Part 2. So this is the rest of the vocabulary. If we go back to your outline, you guys, we've done genetics, heredity, inheritance. We did gene, allele, traits. Then we jumped down to dominant and recessive. So I want to back it up. So let's go and hit homozygous. For some reason it's not going to do that. Come on. So homozygous. All right. So we said that you get 2 versions of each gene for a trait from your parents. So this is inheriting 2 of the. Before I even write the next word, what does homo mean? Same or different?
Same.
Same. So that's going to be in your definition. So 2 of the same alleles for a trait. Okay, so this would mean for the guinea pigs, 2 big H's or 2 little h's. 2 of the same. All right. So H, H, little H. All right. For eye color, how would you write homozygous brown? Capital B, capital B. Right. So if it says, so that's going to be kind of an example, would be if a problem said a homozygous anything, I mean, it's going to give you the trait, a homozygous brown eye color equals exactly what you said, big B, big B. So how would you get blue? Right. So because the big B allele is dominant, we would have to have 2 little b's. So little b equals blue eye color. That's not scrolling down. Okay. All right, so what does hetero mean? If homo means same, what does hetero mean? Heterozygous. So you have 2 different alleles for a trait. Okay. So inheriting 2 different alleles or genes here. A trait. That's not letting me do that. Okay, so big H, little h, or if we say heterozygous brown, how would you write it? Yep, you got it. So hetero is different. Okay, so we've got homozygous, heterozygous, and that describes anytime we're talking about the letters of those genes. It's not, when you see big H, little h, you don't, I mean, you're seeing just the genes, how we label them, but it's not what they look like. So this is considered genotype. those are genotypes. So this is the gene or allele combination for a trait. I don't care if it is homozygous or heterozygous, it's still the genotype. All of those, whatever the person inherited. Now there's two other words that were listed here on your outline. They're both synonyms for either homozygous or heterozygous. Okay, purebred and hybrid. Which of these words, homozygous or heterozygous, do you think means purebred? Think of a purebred dog. It is homozygous. So that would be also just kind of like something else that we need to add in there is heterozygous means, homozygous means, I'm going to put that up here. Also, AKA purebred. So if they say it's a pure breeding tall, a pure breeding hare, it's always going to be two of the same alleles. Okay, so what does it mean to be a hybrid then? It is. So we'll put that with heterozygous. And you'll see this, especially if you go buy flowers, like if you go to Lowe's or somewhere like that, and there's a little tag inside the little 4-pack or the 6-packs of the plants. On there, if you read the tag, sometimes it'll say F1 hybrid. You know, so it's kind of like they're telling you how they made that variety of plant or what they crossed to get that plant. Okay, so purebred is homozygous, hybrid is heterozygous, and all those are describing genotypes. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, so phenotype. So a phenotype, I think of as picture it. What does all of these letters mean? So pheno is the outward expression of the genotype. Like, what does it look of the trait? Why that's not working. All right, so this would be hair, hairless, brown eyes, blue eyes, green eyes, whatever you see. That's what the protein is. So phenotype is what you see, what nature acts on. They don't say, okay, all you heterozygous individuals out there, you're going to survive. And it's not that. It's going to be whatever trait you have that's going to be acted upon. So phenotype is actually what natural selection, when we talk about the survival genetics connection, phenotype is what nature acts upon, whether or not you survive or not, because that's your trait. So I'm going to call it the protein. What nature acts on. And that'll make even more sense when we move to the next unit. So it's the phenotype, not the actual genotype. Okay, so let's see. I think that covers all of those terms. And that gets us into a little bit with Mendel and how we predict heredity. So let's go ahead and look at monohybrid crosses. Okay, so how are we doing so far? Everybody good or no? Lexus, you good? Craig? All right, bless you. This next part, we said we're going to handle it like math. Okay, So everybody's going to jot down the sample problem. We're going to go through and make sure you have that as a guide. So when you do your problems, you'll understand how to set them up and everything. Okay. So the first one we're going to do is based upon this guy. And Gregor Mendel is who we call the father of genetics. So Watson and Crick were our DNA model guys. They had help from Franklin and Chargaff, but this is the guy that he actually was an Austrian monk, which means that he took a vow, a religious vow. He lived with other monks. It's kind of like a nun, a male version of that. And he grew peas in the garden, and he started noticing some things. What he did was he bred pea plants. He had other things growing in his garden, but his experiments that he started crossing these different varieties of peas, this is what he used to actually figure out some of the laws of genetics that we have. So he's the first guy that figured out their traits that are dominant recessive. So when we say he bred pea plants, it also means he crossed them, okay? So when you hear the word cross, it just means that there's a breeding episode, okay? So a breeding episode, and we'll say when they're crossed instead of we just say, well, when these two plants had sex. Well, they need help. Either the wind has to blow the pollen from place to place, a bee has to carry it from place to place, a bat has to carry it. So they need help because the plants aren't moving to get to their mate. So they have to have somebody to help take that pollen back and forth. Well, what Mendel did was when he started looking at his plants, he noticed that tall pea plants always seemed, when crossed with the short, always seemed to be like their babies would be tall. So we'd have a tall pea plant and a short pea plant, and when he crossed them, he took like a little paintbrush, he took like a little bristle, and he went over here to this tall one, and he took the pollen from the tall one and put it on the flowers of the short one. And he took the pollen from the short one and put it on the flowers of the tall one. So he's doing the job of a bee. And in the end, they make a fruit. And the fruit are the peas, either whether you eat them or not. But green peas, so y'all know what a pea pod looks like? You have a pea pod and then there's peas inside of it like this. That is a fruit. So when he popped open those peas, then he noticed different traits. Some of them were green, some were yellow, some were round, some were wrinkled up like a golf ball. So he also noticed if he dried these out and he planted them, those pea plants grew to either be tall or short. So he noticed these traits. He didn't know anything about DNA, nothing. He called it factors. He said, well, there's a factor. There's something being passed between these two plants. So anyway, if he took tall pea plants that were purebred, not pure dead, what would be their genotype? If we say that T represents tall, right, and little t is short. Now, at first he didn't know this, he figured it out that the talls always seem to be dominant over short. So he took a purebred tall and he crossed it, and that's what we use the X for. Just means we bred it with a short. Well, how would we get short pea plant? How would we write the genotype to that? Big T is homozygous tall, pure. Little t. Why not big T, little t? Yeah, the big T would take it over. So when he bred these two, What do you think he got in that next generation? He got all tall. Yeah. So when these two, they can give it big T. This is going to give a little t. He got all tall. So he discovered the law of dominance and recessiveness. And he did this more than just one time. And he did it with different traits. But he tried to only look at one trait at a time. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to look at monohybrid crosses. So that way we're not trying to confuse too many traits at one time. So he discovered dominance and recessiveness. Okay. All right, so let's do one problem and set it up, and then we're going to do a practice, and we'll start making the babies. Okay. We'll at least get started on the baby, and then we can finish it up tomorrow. All right. Okay, so this is very rarely are y'all going to have to copy down a problem. Most of the time, I give you the problems like in your packet. I have lots of practice problems. This one, we're going to copy it down so you'll have that sample to go by. Okay? All right. Anybody have any questions so far? Okay. I'm going to move. We'll add another page. That way we have more room. Okay. So these are called monohybrid crosses. So a cross is a breeding cycle, right? Mono means one. So we're only going to look at one trait in an organism. And we're going to use a Punnett square. To predict the offspring. To individuals. Okay, so here's our problem. All right, so let's do a heterozygous tall pea plant is crossed with a short pea plant. Predict the F1 offspring. Okay. And what we're going to do is underline, we'll break down the problem so you'll know exactly what you have to do in each stage. Okay. Predict the F1 offspring. Now, like they say on the Amoeba Sisters, just because we say that this is the probability, it is a probability. It doesn't mean that it's going to be set in stone. So you may violate, there's violation of laws of probability all the time. We can say there's a really great chance that this is going to happen, and then it doesn't happen. The weather is a good example. They'll tell you, oh, there's a 95% chance it's going to rain. Well, that's a pretty good chance. It may, but we may have a day that's just really crappy and cloudy, and we don't even get anything. So there's a chance, but it doesn't mean it's going to be exactly this. Okay, so you're going to say predict the genotypes and phenotypes of the offspring. Okay, so once you have that, we're going to go through how you're getting credit for each part of your problem. when we do the problems like this, you get partial credit. You get credit for each thing, okay? And then as you learn that process. So y'all are going to get to the point where you can do a lot of these problems in your head, but you have to show your work. It's no different than when you take, you have a math class. You can't just put the answer down, even though you can do it in your head. So the first thing we want to do is underline the parents. So underline the parents in the problem. What are the two parents that we have? Okay, is it heterozygous or homozygous? Because we have to know that. Okay, so heterozygous tall is crossed with, that is the X. That's is bred with, crossed with, instead of short, pea plant. Okay, so those are our parents. Right now we have to write down the genotype of those parents. So we have to have a key. So the very first thing you're going to do, if it's not provided, sometimes it's provided, sometimes it's not, is you're going to come over here and you're going to write key in the margin. Okay, so what's dominant, tall or short? Tall. So let's put big T equals tall. And then make a little t that you can tell the difference, because if you get real sloppy with genetics, it's hard to read your own writing and decipher what you've done. So make sure your little t is different than your big T, and then put short. Okay, so the first thing you do, key. Then you're going to write down the parents' genotypes. Okay, is everybody with me so far? Okay. All right, so we're going to do this. You write P1, parent generation, okay, P1, these are the two parents. So what is the first parent? All right, now hold on. Heterozygous tall. So what does hetero mean? Different or same? Right, so we're going to put big T, little t, okay? Crossed with, now we're looking for our second parent. So who's our second parent? Short. Now, how are we going to get short? What's the genotype for short? Right, you have to have two little t's. You're exactly right, because the big T would take over. Well, now you've gotten some credit. You got your key, you got your parents. This part, this is the Punnett square. Okay, it's when it says predict the F1 offspring. So what we do is below that, or to the side, wherever you want to put it, is we're going to go ahead and do our square. So F1 offspring, first generation, or square like that. Okay, now this doesn't say boy, girl. It doesn't tell us which one's which. Okay, we don't know, but I'm just going to say, let's pretend that this is from the pollen. This is from the daddy part of the plant. So he has two options to give in his sperm. He can either have a big T in his sperm or a little t in his sperm. He's got two options. So half of his sperm should have the capital in it, and the other should have the lowercase, or have the recessive version. Now, after this one, you don't have to draw this, okay? This time we're doing it to make a point. But when we do our problems, you don't have to draw like sperm around it or egg. But so let's say this is the guy. I always drop the one on the left down. The one on the right I put on top. So this will be like the eggs. Well, we only have two options in eggs. She's short, then she's only going to give a little t to her kids, to her little pea kids. So here are her eggs. And those are the possible pollen of genes in the pollen from the dad. So the box represents 4 possible offspring. Or the zygotes, okay? So if that sperm fertilizes that egg, what is that kid gonna have, y'all? Yep, big, little. Okay, how about if that sperm fertilizes that egg? Yep. All right, what if that sperm fertilizes that egg? Okay, how about this one? Loyalty. Okay, so technically we're not getting 4 different options. We're only getting 2 possible options. Well, you've done key, parent, predict the offspring. What we haven't done is the last part, and that's predict the genotype and phenotype. Technically you have, we just have to write it out. So the genotypes of the offspring are in this box. So these are the genotypes. So we're going to write geno. Eventually, when we do this, you'll just put G and P, okay? We're just writing more than what you really have to in the future. All right, phenotypes. Okay, so genotypes that we've got in these kids, these P kids. So look inside the box. Call one out to me. Little t. How many out of 4 are little t?
7.
Okay, so 2 out of 4, right? So 2 out of 4, little t. Okay, when you do probability, you can do it like this. Or what percentage? 50. You could say 50%. You can say 1/2 and reduce it. Okay, that's fine too. All right, who do we have left? All right, big T, little t. How many? Okay, or 1/2 or 50%. Another way that you could write this, you could choose to do fractions. You can choose to do percents. I don't care. Sometimes they'll do it like this. Like that. Y'all seen probability like that? Like a 2 to 2? So you can write it like that. We don't know on our EOC how they're going to write it. They may write it all 3 ways. Not in one problem, but they'll do it all those different, ways to represent it. Okay, so tell me, pheno, what do these kids look like? We don't say, oh, look at those little t's. Yep, so we've got half short, half tall. So 2/4 short, 2/4 tall, or 50-50 or 2 to 2. Okay. Well, you may even see 1 to 1 if they reduced it down. But the point is, they're half and half. Okay. That would get you 100 on that problem. Have all that. Okay. Any questions? Okay. So let's do one. We'll have to do our babies tomorrow, I guess. Yeah, we'll have to. So let's get one started. You're gonna finish for homework, okay? And then there's gonna be one more. So turn to the 4th sheet in your packet. And let's do number 3. And this one's homework. And you're going to finish this one for homework. Okay? So circle 3 and 4. So you've got to interview, make sure you've interviewed 2 people, and then we're going to do these 2 problems. And everybody will end up putting them up on the board, whiteboard, or up here, or showing us what you did. You'll end up showing your work. Okay, so let's just set it up. First of all, tall pea plants. So what's our key? Let's write our key over here. What do we use? What letter do we use for tall?
Big T.
Big T. All right, so big T equals tall, little t equals short. Okay. Well, let's go ahead and do the key for this too. Tongue roll, taco tongue. What do you want to use for tongue roll? And this is where it doesn't matter to me, as long as it's close to the dominant trait. Now, tongue rolling is dominant. You can use big R, you can use big T, either one. So let's use R's. Okay, so big R equals roll, little r can't roll. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to put your parents, and you'll do your square, and then you'll do your genotype and your phenotype. Okay, so your problem should look like that when you lay everything out, and you'll do the same thing for this one. And before we leave tomorrow, I want to make sure everybody knows how to do this because I don't want you to lose it over break. So please ask me questions or come at lunch or whatever we need to do. So I want to make sure 100% everybody can do this problem. All right, y'all have a great day.